The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her stethoscope and glanced at the clock. 11:30 p.m. Just 30 more minutes, and she could finally head home to Emma, who was sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Rodriguez's house next door. The emergency bay at Cedar Falls Memorial Hospital had been quiet all evening, a blessing after the chaos of the previous weekend when the county fair brought its usual collection of mishaps. The sudden wail of sirens shattered the silence. Sarah straightened, her heart rate quickening as she watched the ambulance lights flash through the glass doors. 2 paramedics burst through, wheeling in a man on a stretcher. "Motorcycle accident on Highway 9, called out Jake Morrison, the lead paramedic. "Found him unconscious about 20 minutes ago. No identification, but he was breathing when we arrived." Sarah rushed forward, her trained eyes assessing the patient. Mid-30s, brown hair tousled and matted with blood from a head wound, wearing an expensive leather jacket that was now torn and scuffed. His face, though bruised, had strong features, the kind that belonged in a magazine rather than on the back roads of rural Iowa. "Let's get him to Trauma Room 2, Sarah directed, helping guide the stretcher down the hallway. As they transferred him to the hospital bed, she noticed his hands, calloused and weathered, suggesting someone who worked with them regularly. Strange, she thought, given the quality of his jacket. Dr. Peterson arrived within minutes, his silver hair disheveled from being called out of bed. Together, they worked to stabilize the patient, cleaning wounds and checking for internal injuries. The man's breathing was steady, and his vital signs, while concerning, weren't critical. "Concussion for sure," Dr. Peterson murmured, shining a light into the patient's eyes. "We'll need to monitor him through the night. Sarah, I'll need you to check on him every hour." As the doctor left to update his charts, Sarah began removing the patient's damaged jacket to make him more comfortable. The leather was buttery soft, definitely expensive. As she carefully pulled it away from his shoulders, something heavy fell to the floor with a soft thud. Sarah stared at the thick roll of $100 bills that had scattered across the linoleum. Her breath caught in her throat. There had to be several $1,000s there, maybe more. What kind of drifter carried that much cash? And why would someone with this kind of money be riding alone on a back highway in the middle of the night? Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds of room 304 as Danny Hartwell slowly opened his eyes. The world felt tilted, and his head throbbed with each heartbeat. Hospital smells, antiseptic and floor wax, filled his nostrils as he tried to piece together where he was and how he'd gotten there. A gentle voice broke through his confusion. "Good morning. I'm Sarah, your nurse. How are you feeling?" He turned his head carefully and found himself looking into kind blue eyes, framed by blonde hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was pretty in an understated way, with laugh lines that suggested she smiled often, despite the tired circles under her eyes. "Like I got hit by a truck," Danny managed, his voice hoarse. "What happened?" "Motorcycle accident on Highway 9. You were found unconscious last night." Sarah checked his pulse, her touch professional but gentle. "Do you remember anything?" "Your name, where you were going?" Danny hesitated. The accident was coming back in fragments, the deer in the headlights, the swerve, the world spinning. But he remembered exactly why he'd been on that road, fleeing another suffocating business dinner where Victoria had paraded him around like a prize. He was tired of being Daniel Hartwell, heir to the Hartwell fortune. For once, he wanted to be just Danny. "It's all pretty fuzzy," he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "I think I was just passing through town." Sarah frowned slightly. "The paramedics said you had quite a bit of cash with you. We put it in the hospital safe for security. Do you have any family we should contact? Insurance information?" "No family nearby," Danny said quickly. "And I'm between jobs right now, so..." He let the implication hang in the air, watching as concern flickered across her features. "Don't worry about that right now," Sarah said softly. "The important thing is getting you better." She moved efficiently around the room, checking his IV and making notes on his chart. Danny found himself studying her. The way she moved with quiet confidence, the gentle way she adjusted his pillow without being asked. When was the last time someone had taken care of him without wanting something in return? "You should probably try to get some rest," Sarah said, preparing to leave. "Dr. Peterson will want to run a few more tests this afternoon." "Wait," Danny called out, surprising himself. "I didn't catch your last name." "Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell." She paused at the door. "Is there anything else you need, Mr.?" "Just call me Danny," he said. "No, I'm fine. Thank you." As the door closed behind her, Danny stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, someone was treating him like a regular person, not a bank account with legs. Maybe this accident was exactly what he needed. The afternoon brought Mrs. Pemberton, the hospital administrator, storming into room 304 like a battleship under full sail. Her grey hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression could have curdled milk. "Mr. Doe," she said, consulting her clipboard with barely concealed irritation. "We need to discuss your payment arrangements immediately." Sarah looked up from where she was checking Danny's bandages. "Mrs. Pemberton, the patient is still recovering from a serious concussion. Perhaps this could wait." "Absolutely not." The older woman's voice was sharp. "This hospital is not a charity. We have bills to pay and salaries to meet. If Mr. Doe cannot provide insurance information or payment guarantees within 24 hours, we'll have no choice but to transfer him to County General." Danny felt Sarah tense beside him. County General was 50 miles away and had a reputation for being overwhelmed and understaffed. The thought of this kind woman worrying about his care made his chest tight. "I understand your position," Danny said carefully. "I just need a little time to sort things out." Mrs. Pemberton's expression softened, not 1 degree. 24 hours, Mr. Doe, not 1 minute longer." She turned on her heel and marched out, leaving uncomfortable silence in her wake. Sarah busied herself with unnecessary adjustments to his blankets, clearly upset. "Don't worry about her," she said quietly. "Mrs. Pemberton has been under a lot of pressure lately. The hospital's been struggling financially, and she takes it out on everyone." "Sarah," Danny began, wanting to ease her concern, but she was already moving toward the door. "I need to check on my other patients. Try to get some rest." After she left, Danny lay staring at the ceiling, wrestling with his conscience. He could solve this problem with a single phone call. Hell, he could solve the hospital's financial problems with a single phone call. But the moment he revealed his identity, everything would change. Sarah would look at him differently. Everyone would. 20 minutes later, Sarah returned to find Mrs. Pemberton standing by Danny's bed with a completely different expression, one of bewildered confusion. "What's going on?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Pemberton held up a piece of paper with trembling hands. "Someone just called the billing department. Mr. Doe's entire account has been paid in full, plus a $10,000 donation to our children's wing." She stared at Danny suspiciously. "Care to explain how a man with no job and no family manages to have such generous friends?" Danny met her gaze steadily, his heart pounding. "I'm as surprised as you are, ma'am. Maybe I helped someone out once, and they remembered." Sarah looked back and forth between them, clearly sensing undercurrents she couldn't understand. Mrs. Pemberton huffed and left, muttering about mysterious circumstances and irregular procedures. "Danny," Sarah said slowly, "what aren't you telling me?" The early evening brought blessed quiet to Cedar Falls Memorial. Sarah had finished her rounds and found herself drawn back to room 304, where Danny sat propped up in bed, looking surprisingly alert for someone who'd been unconscious less than 24 hours earlier. "Brought you something," she said, holding up a thermos and a small container. "Coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil, and some cookies my daughter Emma made yesterday. Fair warning, she's 6, so they're heavy on the sprinkles." Danny's face lit up with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "Your daughter bakes?" "She helps," Sarah laughed, settling into the bedside chair. "By helps, I mean she mostly eats chocolate chips and gets flour everywhere. But she's very proud of the final product." She watched as Danny took a careful bite of the cookie, his eyes closing in apparent bliss. "This is incredible. Please tell Emma that these are the best cookies I've ever had. You don't have to flatter a 6-year-old, you know." "I'm not," Danny said seriously. "When's the last time you had something homemade? Something made with love instead of by a machine in some factory?" Sarah studied his face, surprised by the wistfulness in his voice. "You sound like you speak from experience." Danny was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Let's just say my usual meals don't come with sprinkles and a side of maternal pride." They fell into comfortable conversation, sharing stories. Sarah found herself telling him about Emma's first day of school, about the exhaustion of working double shifts since her husband's death 2 years ago, about the small joys that kept her going, Emma's laughter, quiet mornings with coffee, the satisfaction of helping patients heal. Danny listened with an intensity that made her self-conscious. Most people, especially men, seemed to tune out when she talked about single motherhood. But Danny asked thoughtful questions, remembered details, made her feel like her words mattered. "Your turn," Sarah said, pouring more coffee from the thermos. "Tell me about your life before highway accidents and mysterious cash rolls." Danny's expression grew guarded again. "Nothing as interesting as yours. I've moved around a lot, worked different jobs, never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots." "That sounds lonely." "It can be." His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared loneliness, of walls built to protect damaged hearts. Sarah pulled out a well-worn crossword puzzle book. "Want to help me with today's puzzle? I'm stuck on 14 across one who inherits great responsibility." Danny glanced at the clue and went very still. "Air," he said quietly. "That fits perfectly." Sarah penciled in the letters, then looked up to find Danny watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're good at these. Most people can't figure out the tricky clues." "Just lucky, I guess." Dr. Peterson appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Sarah, could I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah followed him into the hallway, leaving Danny alone with his thoughts and the half-finished crossword puzzle. The word air seemed to mock him from the page. "Is everything all right, Dr. Peterson?" Sarah asked. The older man glanced back toward Danny's room, then spoke in a low voice. "I've been thinking about our Mr. Doe, and something doesn't add up. That motorcycle he was riding? I saw it when they towed it from the accident scene. That's a $50,000 bike, Sarah. Custom work. And his injuries, they're consistent with someone who knew how to handle a motorcycle in a crisis. This wasn't some amateur who got in over his head." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he's been asking very specific questions about your shift schedule, your financial situation, even about your daughter's schooling. That kind of interest. It's not normal behavior for a drifter passing through town." Dr. Peterson's concern was evident. "Just be careful, Sarah. I know you see the good in everyone, but sometimes people aren't who they appear to be." As Sarah returned to room 304, she found Danny staring out the window at the parking lot. The crossword puzzle lay forgotten on his bedside table, the word air clearly visible in the completed row. "Is everything okay?" Danny asked, but his voice carried a tension that hadn't been there before. "Fine," Sarah said, but her tone had cooled. "Your coffee's getting cold." Danny turned from the window, and for a moment their eyes met. Sarah saw something there, guilt perhaps, or fear of discovery. Whatever it was, it confirmed Dr. Peterson's warnings and left her wondering who this man really was and what he wanted with her and Emma. Saturday morning brought the familiar comfort of Mabel's diner, where Sarah sat with her usual cup of coffee and Emma's coloring book spread across the worn Formica table. The 6-year-old was carefully filling in a princess dress with purple crayon, while Sarah tried to shake off her lingering unease about Danny. Well, if it isn't our Florence Nightingale," came Betty Carson's voice from the next booth. The waitress, who'd been serving coffee and gossip at Mabel's for over 20 years, never missed an opportunity to share the latest town news. Sarah's stomach tightened as she caught fragments of conversation from the surrounding tables. The mysterious stranger at the hospital had become Cedar Falls' favorite topic of speculation. "I heard he had thousands of dollars in cash." whispered Mrs. Thompson from behind the counter. "What kind of honest person carries that much money?" "My cousin Jake was on the ambulance crew," added Tom Bradley, the hardware store owner. "Said the man was wearing boots that cost more than most people make in a month." Betty slid into the booth across from Sarah without invitation, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Sarah, honey, you've been taking care of him, haven't you? What's your take on this mystery man?" Emma looked up from her coloring, sensing the adult tension. "Who's the mystery man, Mommy?" "Just someone Mommy helped at work, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. Then addressed Betty. "He's a patient, Betty, that's all I can say." "Oh." "And come on," Betty pressed, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "The whole town's talking. Some say he might be running from something. Others think he could be one of those people you see on the news, hiding from the law." The coffee turned bitter in Sarah's mouth. "People shouldn't spread rumors about things they don't understand. I'm just saying you should be careful, especially with little Emma to think about," Betty continued, oblivious to Sarah's discomfort. "A single mother can't be too cautious these days. Strange men with mysterious pasts and unexplained money. It's like something out of a movie." Sarah gathered Emma's crayons with sharp, efficient movements. "We should get going, baby. Mommy has errands to run." As they left the diner, Sarah could feel the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations following them out the door. Small towns had long memories and active imaginations, and she was beginning to realize that her association with Danny might have consequences she hadn't anticipated. Back at the hospital, Sarah found room 304 empty, the bed neatly made and no sign of Danny anywhere. Her heart rate spiked as she hurried to the nurse's station. "Where's the patient from 304? She asked Rita, the day shift supervisor. "Checked himself out about an hour ago," Rita replied, consulting her clipboard. "Said he felt fine and wanted to get back on the road." Strangest thing, though, someone came by just after he left and paid his entire bill in cash. Not just the bill, mind you, but left a $10,000 donation specifically for the children's wing. Sarah stared at Rita in disbelief. $10,000. Mrs. Pemberton is beside herself trying to figure out who it was. Anonymous donor, paid in cash, no contact information. She's convinced it's connected to your mystery patient somehow. The rest of Sarah's shift passed in a blur of routine tasks, but her mind kept circling back to Danny's sudden departure and the mysterious donation. Who was he really? And why did she feel so disappointed that he'd left without saying goodbye? Saturday afternoon found Sarah and Emma at Thompson's Hardware, picking up supplies for small repairs around their modest rental house. Emma chatted excitedly about her upcoming school field trip, while Sarah tried to focus on their shopping list and not think about brown eyes and gentle hands that knew their way around, and crossword puzzles. The sound of hammering from the roof drew their attention as they approached the store. Old Mr. Thompson, who had to be pushing 70, was precariously balanced on a ladder, trying to repair storm damage from the previous week's weather. "Mr. Thompson, you shouldn't be up there alone," Sarah called out, genuine concern in her voice. "Nonsense, young lady," the elderly man replied, though his voice carried a slight tremor. "I've been fixing this roof since before you were born." A familiar voice cut through the afternoon air. "So let me help you with that." Sarah's breath caught as she recognized Danny climbing up a second ladder with practiced ease. He was dressed in work clothes, worn jeans and a flannel shirt, and moved with the confidence of someone comfortable with physical labor. "That's very kind of you, son," Mr. Thompson said gratefully. "These old bones aren't what they used to be." Sarah watched transfixed as Danny expertly handled the roofing materials, his movements efficient and sure. This wasn't the behavior of someone unfamiliar with manual work. Emma tugged on her mother's hand, pointing excitedly. "Mommy, look! It's the man from the hospital." Danny glanced down at the sound of Emma's voice, and his face registered surprise and something that looked like embarrassment. He carefully made his way down the ladder, his cheeks flushed from exertion, and what Sarah suspected was discomfort at being caught. "Hi there," he said to Emma, crouching down to her level. "You must be the famous cookie baker I've heard so much about." Emma beamed with pride. "Mommy says you like my cookies." Best cookies in the world, Danny confirmed solemnly, then looked up at Sarah. I didn't expect to see you here. I could say the same thing, Sarah replied, studying his face. Feeling better, I see. Much better, thanks to you. Danny stood, brushing dust from his hands. Mr. Thompson needed some help, and I had time before I head out of town. That's very kind of you, Sarah said carefully. Though I have to ask, for someone just passing through, you seem pretty comfortable with a hammer. Danny's expression grew guarded. I've done construction work before. Pick up skills wherever you can. Mr. Thompson joined them, his face bright with gratitude. This young man saved me a day's work and probably a fall. Don't know how to thank you, Danny. No thanks necessary, sir. Glad I could help. As they prepared to leave, Emma dropped her school fundraiser envelope, and Danny quickly bent to retrieve it. Sarah saw his eyes scan the contents, the letter about the 8th grade, class trip to the state capital, and the request for $800. That might as well have been $8,000 for their family budget. Class trip sounds exciting, Danny said casually, handing the envelope back to Emma. I really want to go, Emma said wistfully. But Mommy says we have to see if we can save enough money. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, embarrassed by their financial limitations being so obviously displayed. Emma, we should let Mr. Danny get back to his work. As they walked away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Danny was watching them, his expression thoughtful and somehow sad. She also couldn't ignore the way the other workers at the construction site had seemed to defer to him, or how naturally he'd taken charge of the roofing situation. Monday evening brought the monthly PTA meeting at Cedar Falls Elementary, an event Sarah usually dreaded but attended faithfully for Emma's sake. The school's multi-purpose room buzzed with conversation as parents gathered around folding tables, coffee cups in hand, and fundraising packets spread before them. Principal Davis, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, called for attention. Before we discuss the upcoming bake sale, I have some exciting news to share. This morning, our school received an anonymous donation of $50,000, specifically designated for new computer equipment and to ensure that every child can participate in educational field trips, regardless of their family's financial situation. The room erupted in surprised murmurs and excited chatter. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat as the implications of the announcement sank in. $50,000, gasped Jennifer Morrison, the PTA president. Who would make such a generous gift? The donor wishes to remain anonymous, Principal Davis explained. The only stipulation was that the money be used to give every child equal opportunities for learning and growth. Sarah was still processing this information when she became aware of whispered conversations at the table behind her. Betty Carson's voice carried clearly, despite her attempt at discretion. I'm telling you, it has to be connected to that man Sarah's been spending time with, she was saying to Linda Fredericks, the bank teller. First the hospital donation, now this. It's too much of a coincidence. But where would a drifter get that kind of money? Linda whispered back. That's exactly my point, Betty continued. Nobody carries around that much cash unless they're involved in something questionable. And here's Sarah, a single mother with a young daughter, getting mixed up with someone like that. Sarah's cheeks burned as more parents turned to stare at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. She could feel the weight of their judgment, the whispered speculation about her character and decision-making as a mother. Maybe we should ask Sarah directly, suggested Carol Peterson, the doctor's wife. After all, if there are concerns about the source of this money— There are no concerns, Sarah said firmly, standing up from her chair. And I resent the implication that there's something inappropriate about my professional relationship with a patient. The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes focused on her. Emma, who had been coloring quietly in the children's area, looked up with confusion at the sudden tension. Of course, dear, Carol said with false sweetness. We're just concerned about you. A young widow with a child needs to be especially careful about the company she keeps. Sarah gathered her purse and Emma's backpack with shaking hands. I think this meeting is over for us. Come on, Emma. As they left the school, Sarah could hear the conversations resuming behind them, her name mentioned repeatedly in hushed, scandalized tones. The drive home passed in silence, Emma sensing her mother's distress, but not understanding its source. Tuesday evening found Sarah at the construction site where she'd last seen Danny, her anger and confusion driving her to seek answers. She found him loading tools into the back of a pickup truck, his movements tired but efficient in the fading daylight. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. Danny looked up, wariness immediately replacing the pleased surprise that had flickered across his face. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "That depends on your definition of okay," she replied, crossing her arms. "The elementary school received a $50,000 anonymous donation yesterday. The hospital got $10,000 after you left. Emma's class trip is suddenly fully funded, and I'm being treated like some kind of suspicious character by half the town." Danny's hand stilled on the toolbox he'd been securing. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Are you responsible for these donations? Why would you think I had anything to do with it?" Danny deflected, but Sarah caught the slight tension in his shoulders. "Because mysterious money keeps appearing wherever you go, and I'm tired of being treated like I'm either naive or corrupt." Sarah's voice rose slightly. "The whole town thinks I'm involved with some kind of criminal, and I don't even know your last name." "Sarah, And another thing," she continued, her frustration spilling over. "I've been watching you work today. You're not just someone who's done construction before. These men treat you like—" She paused, searching for the right words. "They call you boss when they think I'm not listening." Danny went very still, his face carefully neutral. "You're imagining things, am I? Because Frank Morrison just walked by and nodded to you like he was reporting to a supervisor, not greeting a fellow day laborer." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and growing mistrust. Finally, Danny set down his tools and faced her directly. "What do you want me to say, Sarah?" "I want you to tell me who you really are," she said quietly. "I want you to tell me why you're pretending to be something you're not. And I want to know what you want from me and my daughter." Danny looked at her for a long moment, something that might have been pain flickering in his eyes. "What if I told you that I'm exactly who I appear to be? Someone who's tired of being judged by things that don't matter, looking for a place where people see him for who he really is, not what he has or doesn't have." "Then I'd say you're still not answering my question." Before Danny could respond, Frank Morrison approached, clipboard in hand, and a respectful expression on his weathered face. "Boss, we've got the Henderson contract ready for your signature, and the Thompson job is finished ahead of schedule. Should I have the crew start on the Miller property tomorrow?" The word boss hung in the air between them like an accusation. Sarah stared at Danny, watching the careful mask of anonymity slip from his features. "Frank," Danny said quietly, "we'll discuss this later." The older man looked between Danny and Sarah, suddenly realizing he'd said something he shouldn't have. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll just—" He backed away, leaving them alone with the uncomfortable truth hanging between them. "Sarah," Danny began, but she was already shaking her head. "I trusted you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I brought you cookies my daughter made. I told you about my husband, about our struggles, about things I don't share with anyone. And you've been lying to me from the beginning. I never lied to you. Omitting the truth is the same thing." Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't know who you are or what kind of game you think you're playing, but I want you to stay away from me and my daughter." She turned to leave, but Danny caught her arm gently. "Please, let me explain." Sarah looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. "Explain what?" "That you've been pretending to be poor while secretly throwing money around my life. That you've made me the subject of town gossip and speculation. That everything I thought I knew about you was a performance." Danny released her arm, his expression pained. "It wasn't a performance. My feelings, the connection we had, that was real." "Was it?" Sarah asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were studying me like some kind of experiment. Poor single mother, let's see how she reacts to mysterious kindness from a stranger. That's not— I have to go, Sarah interrupted. Emma's waiting for me, and I've already spent too much time trying to figure out who you really are. As she walked away, Sarah heard Danny call her name once more, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't afford to be drawn back into whatever web of deception he'd woven around her life. Emma deserved a mother who made smart choices, who could tell the difference between genuine kindness and manipulation. Behind her, Danny stood alone in the gathering dusk, watching the taillights of her car disappear down the rural road. For the first time in years, he'd found someone who looked at him and saw not a bank account or a business opportunity, but simply a man. And now, because of his own cowardice and need for anonymity, he'd lost her. 3 days passed in tense silence before Sarah's world shifted once again. She was restocking supplies in the hospital break room when Dr. Peterson approached, his expression unusually serious. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," he said, settling into one of the worn plastic chairs. "I've been doing some research into our mysterious Mr. Doe, and I think I misjudged the situation entirely." Sarah paused, a box of gauze halfway to the shelf. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've discovered who's been keeping this hospital afloat for the past 2 years. Dr. Peterson pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Anonymous donations, equipment purchases, salary supplements that prevented layoffs. It's all been coming from the same source. Someone who's been watching out for Cedar Falls Memorial long before your patient ever showed up." Sarah set down the supplies and took the chair across from him. "I don't understand. The payment records show a pattern of support that goes back 24 months. Whoever's been helping us has intimate knowledge of our financial struggles and specific needs. They've been funding the children's wing expansion, subsidizing our emergency equipment, even covering the heating bills during the worst months." A chill ran down Sarah's spine as the implications began to register. "Are you saying, Danny—" "I'm saying that your instincts about him might have been right from the beginning," Dr. Peterson interrupted gently. "The timing of these donations suggests someone who cares deeply about this community and the people in it. Someone who's been helping quietly, without seeking recognition or gratitude." Sarah stared at the documents, her mind racing. If Danny had been supporting the hospital all along, it meant his presence there wasn't some calculated manipulation. It was the action of someone who genuinely cared about the place and the people who worked there. "There's something else," Dr. Peterson continued. "Rita mentioned that he specifically requested to be treated like any other patient. He didn't want special attention or preferential care. That's not the behavior of someone with ulterior motives, Sarah. That's someone who wanted to experience genuine human connection." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. Emma was running a fever at school and needed to be picked up immediately. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in the pediatric ward of the very hospital she worked in, holding Emma's small hand as her daughter dozed fitfully. The fever had spiked to 102 degrees, and Emma's breathing was labored in a way that made Sarah's nursing instincts scream with worry. "Pneumonia," Dr. Peterson confirmed after reviewing the chest x-rays. "We caught it early, but she'll need to stay here for observation and treatment." Sarah felt the familiar weight of medical bills and missed work settling on her shoulders. But those concerns evaporated when she looked around the pediatric ward. The equipment surrounding Emma's bed was state-of-the-art. Monitors that beeped reassuringly, an IV system that delivered medication with precise accuracy, oxygen support that helped her daughter breathe easier. Nurse Rita appeared at her elbow, her voice gentle with understanding. "The children's wing was completely renovated last year," she said quietly. "New ventilation systems, advanced monitoring equipment, everything a sick child could need. Whoever's been supporting this hospital made sure our youngest patients get the best possible care." Sarah stared at the machines keeping her daughter stable and comfortable. Machines that might not have been there without anonymous generosity. The thought that Danny might have been responsible for this level of care that his hidden support might now be helping her own child, left her feeling shaken and confused. Emma stirred in the bed, her eyes fluttering open. "Mummy, my chest hurts. I know, baby. The doctors are taking very good care of you." Sarah smoothed Emma's hair, fighting back tears of gratitude and regret. "Is Mr. Danny going to visit me?" "He was nice." Sarah's throat tightened. "Mr. Danny had to go away, sweetheart. But you're going to get better right here, with all these wonderful machines helping you breathe." As Emma drifted back to sleep, Sarah found herself staring out the window at the parking lot where she'd first confronted Danny. Had she been completely wrong about him? Had her own fears and the town's gossip blinded her to the truth about his character? Friday morning brought Sarah to Main Street on her way to the pharmacy, Emma's prescription clutched in her tired hand. The past few days of hospital vigils had left her emotionally drained, and she was grateful that Emma was finally well enough to come home. She was coming out of Miller's pharmacy when she spotted a familiar figure loading boxes into the back of a pickup truck. Danny stood near Thompson's Hardware, but something was different about his posture. There was a finality to his movements that suggested departure rather than daily work. Before she could stop herself, Sarah found her feet carrying her across the street. Danny looked up as she approached, surprise and wariness flickering across his features. "Sarah, how's Emma?" The genuine concern in his voice caught her off guard. "She's better. Pneumonia, but she's responding well to treatment." Relief flooded Danny's expression. "Thank God! I heard she was in the hospital and I—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I'm glad she's okay. You heard?" Sarah studied his face. "From who?" Danny's jaw tightened slightly. "Small towns talk. I was worried about her." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of their last conversation hanging between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Dr. Peterson told me about the hospital donations. The ones that have been coming for 2 years. Danny went very still, his hands stilling on the box he'd been loading. "I don't know what you mean." "The equipment in the children's ward that helped my daughter breathe. The heating system that keeps the hospital warm. The salary supplements that prevented layoffs and kept good nurses like Rita working there." Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. "Someone has been taking care of this community for a long time, hasn't he?" Danny met her eyes, and she saw the mask of pretense finally slipping away. "Maybe some people just believe in taking care of the places and people that matter. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the moment people know who I am, everything changes," Danny said simply. "They stop seeing me and start seeing dollar signs. They stop being genuine and start being strategic." His expression grew pained. "You were the first person in years to look at me and see just me. I couldn't bear to lose that." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "But by hiding it, you lost it anyway." "I know." Danny's voice was barely above a whisper. "I was selfish. I wanted to be Danny the construction worker, not Daniel Hartwell, heir to the Hartwell fortune. I wanted someone to care about me for who I am, not what I have." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Hartwell. As in Hartwell Enterprises? The family that built half this town?" Danny nodded miserably. "My grandfather started with grain elevators. My father expanded into land development and investment. Now the family business owns about 60% of the commercial properties in Cedar Falls, including the hospital." Sarah stared at him, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "You're not just rich. You're worth about $200 million according to the latest financial reports," Danny finished flatly. "I own the ranch outside town, the majority stake in the hospital, half the buildings on Main Street. I'm exactly the kind of person you'd never want to get involved with." "That's not true," Sarah said automatically, then stopped herself. Was it true? Would she have treated him differently if she'd known from the beginning? "Isn't it?" Danny's smile was sad. "You've seen how this town reacts to unexplained money. Imagine how they'd react to you, dating the richest man in 3 counties. Every conversation would be analyzed, every gesture scrutinized for ulterior motives." Before Sarah could respond, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, and an elegant woman in a designer suit stepped out. She was beautiful in a polished, expensive way, blonde hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, jewelry that caught the morning sunlight. "Daniel," the woman called, her voice carrying the crisp tones of expensive education. "Thank goodness I found you. We have so much to discuss." Danny's entire body tensed. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach as the woman approached with confident strides. This was clearly someone from Danny's real world, the world of wealth and privilege that Sarah could never belong to. "I came to bring you home, darling," Victoria said, linking her arm through Danny's with casual possessiveness. "This little sabbatical of yours has gone on long enough. The board is asking questions, and we have a wedding to plan." The word wedding hit Sarah like a slap. She took an involuntary step backward, her face burning with embarrassment and hurt. "Victoria, this isn't the time or place," Danny said, trying to extract his arm from her grip. "Of course it is," Victoria continued blithely, her eyes finally registering Sarah's presence with cool assessment. "Daniel has been hiding out here playing construction worker, but reality has to intrude eventually." She turned to Sarah with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Victoria Ashford, Daniel's fiancée." "And you are?" Sarah felt the world tilt around her. Fiancée. Of course, someone like Danny would have someone like Victoria waiting for him, someone who belonged in his world of wealth and sophistication. "I'm no one," Sarah said quietly, backing toward her car. "Just someone who made a mistake." "Sarah, wait!" Danny called, finally breaking free from Victoria's grip. "It's not what you think." But Sarah was already walking away, her cheeks burning with humiliation. How could she have been so naive? Of course, Danny Hartwell, heir to a fortune, wouldn't be seriously interested in a small-town nurse and single mother. She'd been a diversion, an experiment in slumming with ordinary people. "Sarah, please!" Danny's voice carried across the street, but she didn't turn around. "Let her go, Daniel," she heard Victoria say dismissively. "We have important matters to discuss, and this little interlude has already caused enough disruption to our plans." As Sarah reached her car, she caught one last glimpse of Danny in her rearview mirror. He was standing in the middle of Main Street, watching her drive away while Victoria gestured impatiently beside him. The image burned itself into her memory. The distance between them measured not just in feet, but in the vast gulf between their worlds. The Cedar Falls Harvest Festival had been a tradition for over 50 years, transforming the town square into a celebration of community and autumn abundance. Sarah walked through the festivities with Emma, trying to focus on her daughter's excitement, rather than the curious stares and whispered conversations that seemed to follow them everywhere. The past week had been a blur of hospital shifts and careful avoidance of any place she might encounter Danny. The town's gossip mill had been working overtime since Victoria's arrival, and Sarah had heard enough whispered speculation about the nurse and the millionaire to last a lifetime. "Mommy, look." Emma pointed excitedly toward the small stage where Principal Davis was setting up a microphone. "They're going to make announcements." Sarah forced a smile, but her heart sank as she spotted Danny near the stage, dressed in an expensive suit that emphasized just how different he was from the man in work clothes she'd thought she'd known. Victoria stood beside him, perfectly polished and clearly in her element. Principal Davis tapped the microphone, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have some exciting news to share. Today, Mr. Daniel Hartwell has generously offered to donate $2 million to build a new family care center at Cedar Falls Memorial Hospital." The crowd erupted in surprised applause and excited chatter. Sarah felt her knees go weak as the implications sank in. Danny stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly across the square. "The new wing will be called the Sarah Mitchell Family Care Center, in honor of a nurse who exemplifies everything this community stands for: compassion, dedication, and the belief that every person deserves excellent care, regardless of their circumstances." Sarah stared at him in shock, aware that every eye in the crowd had turned to her. Emma tugged on her hand, confused by the sudden attention. "Furthermore," Danny continued, I'm announcing my intention to make Cedar Falls my permanent home. I've been away too long from the community that shaped me, and I want to invest not just money, but my life in the place and people I care about." Victoria's face went pale, her composure cracking for the first time since Sarah had met her. "Daniel, what are you doing?" she hissed, but her voice carried in the sudden silence. Danny turned to face her, his expression sad but resolute. "I'm choosing the life I want, Victoria, not the one that's expected of me." "You can't be serious," Victoria said, her voice rising. "Our families have had an understanding for years. The merger of our companies, our engagement, it's all been planned by everyone except me," Danny replied quietly. "I never wanted that life, Victoria. I thought I could go through with it, but I can't. I won't." Victoria's mask of sophistication finally slipped completely. "You're throwing away everything for a small-town nurse and her child. This is insanity, Daniel. I have contracts, agreements that I never signed," Danny interrupted firmly. "Whatever understanding our families had was never my understanding. I'm sorry if that hurt you, but I won't live a lie anymore." The crowd watched in fascination as Victoria gathered her composure, her expression hardening with determination. "You'll regret this decision, Daniel. I have influence, connections. I can make things very difficult for you and your little hospital project." Before Danny could respond, Emma broke free from Sarah's grip and walked toward the stage with the fearless confidence of a 6-year-old. "Mr. Danny," she said, her clear voice carrying across the silent square, "thank you for helping my mommy and the hospital. You made me feel better when I was sick." The simple words from a child seemed to shift something in the crowd's mood. Faces that had been watching with curiosity began to soften with understanding and approval. Victoria stared at Emma with barely concealed distaste. "Daniel, surely you can see how inappropriate this all is. This child, this woman, they're not our kind of people." The words hung in the air like a slap, and Sarah felt every protective instinct flare to life. Before she could move, however, Emma looked up at Victoria with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "Why are you being mean?" Emma asked. "Mr. Danny is nice, and nice people should be with other nice people." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, and Sarah saw several townspeople nodding in agreement. Victoria's face flushed red as she realized she'd lost the moral high ground in the most public way possible. Danny stepped down from the stage and knelt in front of Emma, his expression gentle. "Thank you for saying that, Emma. You're absolutely right. Nice people should be with other nice people." He stood and looked directly at Sarah, his eyes holding a mixture of hope and vulnerability that made her heart race. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying across the square, but somehow feeling intimate, "I know I handled everything wrong. I know I hurt you by not being honest from the beginning. But Emma's right. Nice people should be with other nice people. And you're the nicest person I've ever met." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as the weight of the town's attention pressed down on her. This was her moment of choice. She could walk away and protect herself and Emma from the complications of loving someone from such a different world, or she could trust that the connection they'd shared over coffee and crossword puzzles was real enough to bridge any gap. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "So am I," Danny replied, stepping closer. "I'm scared that you'll never forgive me for lying. I'm scared that my money will always come between us. I'm scared that I'll never be worthy of the kindness you showed a stranger in a hospital bed." The autumn afternoon light filtered through the trees surrounding the town square, casting golden shadows across the festival crowd. Sarah looked at Danny, really looked at him, and saw not the heir to a fortune or the owner of half the town, but the man who had listened to her stories about single motherhood with genuine interest, who had worried about her daughter's illness, who had quietly supported the community she loved. "The Sarah Mitchell Family Care Center?" she asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. "If you'll let me," Danny said softly. "I want to honor the woman who taught me that the best kind of wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the connections we make with people who see us for who we really are." Sarah felt the last of her resistance crumble. "I still don't know if this is smart." Smart is overrated, Emma announced from beside them, making the crowd chuckle. Mommy always says the best things happen when you're brave enough to try. Sarah looked down at her daughter, then back at Danny. In his eyes she saw the same hope and uncertainty she felt, the same willingness to risk everything for the possibility of something real and lasting. "Okay," she said quietly, then louder. "Okay." Danny's face broke into a smile that rivaled the autumn sunshine. "Okay? Okay," Sarah repeated, stepping closer to him. "But we're going to take this slowly. And Emma comes first, always." "Always," Danny agreed solemnly. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the crowd erupted in applause and cheers, Victoria retreated to her sedan with whatever dignity she could muster. The festival continued around them, but Sarah and Danny stood in their own bubble of possibility, surrounded by a community that had watched their story unfold and given its approval. The last scene belonged to the quiet moments after the festival, when the crowds had dispersed and the autumn evening settled gently over Cedar Falls. Sarah found Danny in the hospital's memorial garden, where he was carefully planting bulbs that would bloom in the spring. "Planning ahead?" she asked, settling beside him on the bench that overlooked the plantings. "Someone once told me that the best things in life require patience and care," Danny replied, brushing dirt from his hands. "I figured it was time I learned to tend something that would grow." Emma ran ahead of them, chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk while they sat in comfortable silence. The events of the day felt like a dream, but the solid presence of Danny beside her, the sound of Emma's laughter, the promise of spring flowers yet to bloom, these things felt real and lasting. "I have a confession," Sarah said softly. Danny tensed slightly. "What's that?" "I Googled the Hartwell family fortune last night." She saw his expression grow wary and quickly continued. $200 million, Danny, that's more money than I can even comprehend. Does it change anything?" he asked quietly. Sarah considered this seriously. "It changes everything and nothing. Everything, because I understand now why you were scared to tell me, why Victoria acted like she owned you, why the whole town will be watching us. Nothing, because when I look at you, I still see the man who helped me with crossword puzzles and worried about my daughter. And which one matters more?" Sarah smiled, watching Emma capture a firefly in her cupped hands before gently releasing it. "The man who's sitting here planting flowers for a garden he may never see bloom. The man who cares enough about this community to support it quietly, without recognition. The man who's brave enough to choose love over expectation." Danny reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with gentle certainty. "I love you, Sarah Mitchell. I love your strength, your kindness, your terrible coffee, and the way you make me want to be worthy of the faith you have in people." "I love you too," Sarah replied, the words feeling both new and inevitable. "All of you. The construction worker and the millionaire, the man who fixes roofs and the one who builds hospitals. But mostly, I love the person who saw Emma drop that fundraiser envelope and made sure every child in her class could go on that trip." As the stars began to appear overhead, they sat together in the garden that would bloom with the spring. Surrounded by the quiet promise of new beginnings, Emma settled between them, content and secure in the knowledge that her small family had grown to include someone who would plant flowers and build hospitals and help with homework with equal dedication. The story of the nurse who didn't know her patient was the richest man in town had become the story of two people who found in each other not what they expected, but what they needed: authentic love that could weather gossip and bridge differences, rooted in the simple recognition of genuine goodness in one another. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please support the channel, subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments so you don't miss the next episodes. See you in the next story.